I'm not sure, but I think for those of you who have junior high kids, I think we're going to bring them back in. So if they come back in, don't worry. It's something I kind of requested because we're doing some really important stuff around some biblical themes I want them to learn about today. So this morning we are kind of jumping back a little bit and talking about what happened on Wednesday. How many of you know what Wednesday was this past week? It was Ash Wednesday, right? Ash Wednesday. How many of you have participated in an Ash Wednesday service before? You done that? Okay, I'd say a few hands. I would say 25, 35%. And so it's probably something that's becoming less common. It's probably becoming something that's less familiar with our culture. I actually saw a news clip this week with Jeb Bush at a town hall meeting, and he had the ashes on his forehead, and I bet there were some people going, dude, I wouldn't vote for him. He can't even take a bath, you know? He's got dirt on his head. And so, you know, it's kind of weird to see people walking around with this mark of ashes on their head. But, you know, it's interesting. We prepare for a lot of things in our lives, but we don't always think about preparing for Easter. What are some things that you're preparing for right now that are going to happen in the next 6 or 8 months? What are some things you're planning for? Vacation, okay? So you're trying to figure out your plans, where you can go, how many days you can be gone, that kind of stuff. Yeah. What else?
Taxes and how to avoid them.
What?
Taxes and how to avoid taxes.
Taxes and how to avoid them, right? Yeah, yeah.
House remodeling.
House remodeling, okay, so a lot of plans go into that, right? Absolutely. What else? Oh yeah, yeah. I mean, we're gonna send a team on Easter weekend, and they're gonna go and help Samaritan's Purse with home reconstruction, I believe, right? Isn't that what we're doing? So several guys and a couple gals are going down to work on that kind of stuff. So we got to make plans. How many of you guys planned for Valentine's Day? I mean, some of your wives are going, you should have, right? You know, I mean, well, if you didn't. And so yesterday we had our marriage retreat. We had about 8 couples here and had a great time talking about what it is that helps us have healthy marriages. And guys, I just got to tell you, if you missed it, you need to get the book for men only because it really helps you understand how our wives are wired and how they're different than us and how they think differently about most everything from us. And so, you know, and we, vice versa, think very differently about everything from them. And so their book, For Women Only, helps them to understand us. Great, great stuff. And so we were here yesterday and we prepared for this retreat. And I got to share with you this one video that we shared at the beginning, talking about, since this is also Valentine's Day, talking about things that men, you guys shouldn't say. All right, so let's watch this.
You know, you're just like your... Say it! You're not mad at me?
No.
You're sure?
I'm fine.
Okay, cool, because I thought... Top of the line, baby, you're gonna love it.
A scale? Wow, I lost 5 pounds.
Nice, 25 to go.
5 more to go. Grass, you never listen to anything I say.
Relax.
These pants are really tight. Did you put them in the dryer?
No, but I can put you on a treadmill. We're a team. We're a dynamic duo. She's my side chick. Side chick! Happy Valentine's Day! Because you're hot and steamy. Why can't you be more like Jimmy's wife?
What?
I said what? Hi, I'd like to order flowers for my wife. I wanted to say, baby, I love you, and you're the only one for me.
You were right. I was wrong.
All right, pick a partner.
I love that clip. I just love it. And so, you know, we prepare for a lot of things, but we don't always prepare our hearts for celebrating the most important time of the Christian year. In just a few weeks, we're going to gather together, and we're going to, on Good Friday, we're going to talk about the death of Christ and what that means for us. Easter Sunday morning, we're going to get up. Some of you are going to go to sunrise service out of Dawes if you're brave, and hopefully the weather will cooperate. And we're going to celebrate the resurrection of Christ. And then Sunday morning, we're going to have service, and we're going to talk about that. And so there are some things that we need to do spiritually to kind of get ourselves ready for these events. And so one of the things that Christians do all over the world, I think that's cool that we participate sometimes with Christians that do the same thing all over the world. And we do this thing called Ash Wednesday. Now, we've talked about doing Ash Wednesday, and we figured that it would be more effective and more comprehensive if we just did the Ash thing on Sunday so that we could kind of get everybody's participation. And so there's 4 things that I want us to understand about the ashes. 4 things that Scripture explains to us are part of the connection of these ashes. And so the first one is this. You are dust, and to dust you will return. Just look at your neighbor and say, you're dust. Go ahead. You're dust. I mean, it's really kind of a sobering thought, isn't it? That we're dust. That in 100 years, there's not going to be much evidence that we even existed. Maybe a few pictures, maybe a few written notes or things that are stories that your family passed down. But for the most part, in 100 years, we will not leave some sort of a worldwide or even local or maybe even only inter-family heritage or presence. And so it's sobering to think about that. In Genesis, in the verse in your bulletin says Genesis chapter 2, but it's chapter 3. So I don't know how we did that, but Genesis chapter 3, verse 14. Let's look at this story. Now this is a story about Adam and Eve. What did Adam and Eve do to get in trouble? You remember? They ate from the tree of the knowledge, right, of good and evil. It's the only tree in the garden God said don't eat from it. You can eat from any other tree. You can have free reign. Just don't eat from the tree of the knowledge of good and evil. And they ate of it. And so it says in verse 14, so the Lord God said to the serpent, because he had tempted them, because he had confused them, because he had led them down a path of untruth and disobedience, because you have done this, cursed are you above all the livestock and all the wild animals. You will crawl on your belly, and you will eat dust all the days of your life. And I will put enmity between you and the woman, and between your offspring and hers. He will crush your head, and you will strike his heel. To the woman he said, you will greatly increase in your pains in childbearing. With pain you will give birth to children. Your desire will be for your husband, and he will rule over you. Sometimes. To Adam he said, I love this, because you listened to your wife. I love that. And it wasn't that Adam didn't have a choice, right? But he says, because you listened to your wife and ate from the tree about which I commanded you, you must not eat of it. Cursed is the ground because of you. Through painful toil, you will eat of it all the days of your life. And then he says, and it will produce thorns and thistles for you, and you will eat the plants of the field. By the sweat of your brow, you will eat your food until you return to the ground. And here's the verse. Until you return to the ground, since from it you were taken. For dust you are, and to dust you will what? Return. It's a sobering thought. There's a lot of things in this life that I think we elevate the importance of, whether it's things in our household or things between us in our marriage or things between us in our families. What are some things that families fight about? Money? Oh, yeah. Man, I mean, especially, and this is so sad, when someone dies. I can't tell you the number of funerals I've done for families who won't talk to each other because they're upset about how the executor of the estates of their parents are handling the wishes of their parents. Or in worst case scenarios, and just a warning for all of you, put this stuff in writing, please. Yeah. It will save your families a lot of arguments. If you can just say, Mom said, and it's here in black and white, you just hand it out to everybody, and no one has to argue about, well, now when I was beside the bed, here's what she told me. No, just you know. But people fight about that. Well, I wanted 10 grand, or I wanted the house, or I wanted the car. And so we get so uptight about that stuff that we will never talk to that family member again. And those things come between us. Husbands and wives, there are probably some things this past week that you thought about that were not really that important. You ever do that? Huh? Dinner, okay? Yeah, what dinner's going to be, or what dinner was, you know? Where we're going to go out, why we didn't go out. I mean, there's a list 100 miles long. At my house, we talked about this yesterday. At my house, Melissa would like it. She's told me this several times. Well, first of all, she would like it if I take all of my napkins out of my pocket before they go to the laundry. Guys, I don't know why, but I can't remember that. I mean, I'm like getting the laundry out of the dryer and then taking it upstairs, and then while she's not looking, I'm like throwing it in the trash can so she don't see that I left a whole wad of paper towels in my back pocket or something. But I can't seem to remember that, and so she just kind of accepted the fact that I'm not mentally capable of emptying my pockets. But she also has let me know that she likes the towels to be folded a certain way. Gals, do you have certain ways you fold towels?
Yes.
All right. What's the proper way to fold a towel?
However Melissa does it.
However Melissa does it. Good answer. How many of you expect the first fold to be with it hanging long ways?
Yes.
Ooh. Okay, so how many of you expect it to be the first fold wide ways? Oh, wow, that's crazy. Melissa's wrong. She's not here. She's got a migraine, so I'll have to tell her. And so she wants her towels folded long way for some reason. I don't know why. So when she goes to get towels, if I folded the towels, now first of all, for a man to fold the towels, you'd think I'd be like, hey, that's pretty nice, you know? It's pretty cool. But it's still, and she does feel like it's pretty cool, pretty nice, but it's still disturbing to her if I didn't fold them the right way. It's just something that's inside of her. I'm sure that none of the rest of you have little things inside of you that drive you crazy, right? None of you, right? And so it's just a little thing. Somebody said yesterday, none of that stuff matters except how she puts the toilet paper on the roll. Has to be, on the top, coming over the top, right? Not down the back, over the top. And so, I got two choices. I can either fold the towels the way she wants them folded because I know that it brings peace to her life, or I can just say, well, that's the dumbest thing I've ever heard, how you fold a towel matters. It doesn't matter to God, why should it matter to us, right? Doesn't matter to the rest of the world, doesn't impact the world in any way, which way I fold the towels. Why would it matter to God or me or anybody else? And I could say, so I don't really care. How's that work? How's that work out?
You'd be on the video.
Yeah, I'd be on the video. And it's not like she goes haywire over it. But it's a little thing, right? It's a little thing. But what if I say, all right, so it's not important to God, it's not important to anybody else in the whole world, but it's important to her. And if it's important to her and I do it, it takes one more thing off her anxiety, that plays into her anxiety. Why in the world would I not do that? It's simple. I mean, we ought to be able to do those simple things all day long. And here's the thing is we fight about all this little stuff, and God wants us to remember on Ash Wednesday that you are dust. I mean, you think about, okay, so we just thought about how we were going to fold the towels. Now think of yourself dead. Does it matter? Should you have thought about it? Or should you guys have just folded it the way she wants it done? Because someday you're going to be dead. Or, should you fight about, should you be mad at the lady in front of you at Kroger's because she's taking up the whole aisle and she's staring at the 50 bottles of ketchup trying to figure out the one she wants and she won't get out of your way, Or should you just be thankful that you're breathing, right? Instead of mad that someone's slowing you down. The worst curse in all of Hebron is that red light down there. Because it's always red and there's no one there. I mean, I sit at that light 50 times a week coming down here to the church, and never does anyone sit at any of the other corners. And I'm like, why is this light red? And when nobody's there, just confession, I want to run the light. And I've really thought about it a few times. It's like, no one's here. I'd probably not get away with it, and then my name would be in the paper. And you guys would find that really funny, I'm sure. But we're going to die. We are dust. And it kind of helps us to put things into perspective, what's really important and what's not. And so the ashes remind us of that. Here's the second thing the ashes remind us of. The ashes are a symbol of humility. They're a symbol of humility. Listen to these verses from Proverbs. It says, a good name is more desirable than great riches. Get that. A good name is more desirable than great riches. To be esteemed is better than silver or gold. Rich and poor have this in common. The Lord is the maker of them all. A prudent man sees danger and takes refuge. A wise man, in other words, sees danger and takes refuge. But the simple, or stupid, I guess, keep going and suffer for it. Verse 4, humility and the fear of the Lord bring wealth and honor and life. Do you believe that? This is a principle that we talked about in youth group a couple weeks ago, and we talked about it in recovery group, that if we continue to pile good decisions on top of good decisions, you know, if we remain consistent in our marriages and consistent in our jobs, and we try to be honorable in our community, it builds this thing for you. It builds this reputation. It builds levels of trust with your family and your spouse and your community. And it gives you influence and power. And God says that when you are willing to humble yourself before Him, that He's the one that does that for you. You don't have to do it for yourself. You don't have to walk around with your chest puffed out and say, I worked hard and I earned this or I earned that. You can just humble yourself before God, and then over time, He builds you up to where He can exalt you, and you can say, it's not because of me, it's because of Him. James chapter 4, verse 8 says this, come near to God, and He will come near to you. Wash your hands, you sinners, and purify your hearts, you double-minded. Grieve, mourn, and wail. Change your laughter to mourning and your joy to gloom. Verse 10. Humble yourselves before the Lord, and He will what? He will lift you up. You guys ever known a really, really arrogant Christian? You ever known an arrogant Christian? Huh? I mean, it is one of the most offensive things in the world to meet someone who's so arrogant that they think they've got it all figured out and they're the most spiritual person on the planet because they go to church more than you and they read the Bible more than you, and they're not short about letting you know that, right? Anytime they can corner you and prove you wrong and make themselves right and puff themselves up, then boy, that's their best day, you know? And so one of the things that I want us to understand is that I believe that humility is one of the main signs that you really are a servant of God. You hear me? Don't matter how much you know, doesn't matter how much you serve, it's how humble you are before God. And so here's some signs of humility. I want you to ask yourself, is this me? You know? Am I marked with some humility, some signs of humility? If you're a humble person, first of all, you place others above yourself. You place others above yourself. Do you do that? Do you place others above yourself, their needs above your needs? Husbands and wives are supposed to do that. Guess what? If the husband and the wife both do that, it's an amazing thing. If both of them are like, I'm going to put you first. No, I'm going to put you first. And if you both do that, man, I mean, it changes the whole dynamic of your relationship. Place others above yourselves. If you're humble, you don't demand your own way, even when you're right. That's hard for us, isn't it? How many of you are often right? You often right? Yeah, you're like, well, yeah, I am, right? But the question is, are you willing to let someone else do it differently, or maybe even be wrong, and accept that and love them anyway? Are you willing to do that? Humility means that you don't always demand it to be done your way, that you're willing to humble yourself, not under people who don't know what they're doing, but under God who knows how to help them more than you know how to help them. See, it doesn't really help people who don't know what they're doing for you to say, you're an idiot. And if you just do X, Y, and Z, that whole thing would clear up and you'd be fine. That's not helpful anyway. But if you as a Christian and a servant of God, humble yourself before Him, and when you see other people screwing it up, and he hasn't put you in a place where you can speak those things to them, then your role is to be humble and to pray that God helps them and you love them and help them anyway through it. And maybe through that relationship have an opportunity to speak into them, not demanding your own ways, you know me. Choosing to love those that you really, really disagree with. How many of you have friends that are on other party lines politically than you? You have other friends that are on other party lines politically than you? I mean, we've got to be able to say, hey, God called us to love people of all different, I mean, any kind of thing. We've got to be able to look past that and choose to love them. And the last thing, this is important, is that humility means that we don't think that because we're so godly that we've earned a pass on suffering. There's a lot of Christians who float along through life and they're like, yeah, I go to church every week and I read my Bible and I try to honor God with my life, and then they get cancer. Or some horrific thing happens to one of their children. Something terrible happens and they're like, God, I don't deserve this. No, you don't. None of us do. It's not about deserving or not deserving. I'm 47 and I've never had a horrible thing happen yet, but it's going to happen, right? Either I'm going to die or one of my family members is going to die or we're going to get sick. That's just a part of this broken world. And if I get arrogant enough to say, I ought to be lifted above all of you, right? That's what I'm saying. I ought to be special before God, more special than all of you, and I shouldn't have to go through that because I've done everything right that I can do. That's arrogant. And so we all have to accept the fact that we live in a broken world. We're all going to suffer. None of us have been good enough to be exalted to a place that exempts us or earn a pass from suffering and hardship. That's an attitude of humility, and humility is the evidence that God lives in you. You hear that? Humility is the evidence that God truly lives in you. If you don't have a humble bone in your body, you need to start praying about what's wrong in your spirit, because God brings humility to us. So it's a symbol of death or going to dust. It's a symbol of humility. Here's the third thing. It's a symbol of sorrow and regret. You ever done something that you really, really regretted? Ever done that? Man, you're just like, you can't sleep, you can't eat. And if it's a secret for a while, it's like, oh, I got to tell. I mean, I can remember times when I lied to Mom and told her things. And I was going to a friend's house, but I wasn't really at a friend's house, you know. I mean, none of you did that, right? Where you lie to your parents, you say you're going to go stay overnight at a friend's house, then you're really at a party with a bunch of girls or alcohol. And so,
I love you.
I love you too, Mom. And so, but here's the thing. She was smart. She'd say, look, you're on your own, man. You got a car. You can tell me whatever you want, but God sees everything you do. That was terribly mean. Because, man, I mean, I'd do those things, and then I'd get home, and I would just, I mean, Mom and I had we were very close. We didn't have any secrets. And so when I had a secret, man, I mean, it was like a knife. And I was miserable. And she probably loved that I was miserable, you know. And so a day or two goes by, and finally I can't stand it anymore, and I got to tell her so that I can just get this off my chest, you know. And so do we have sorrow and regret? In the story of Jonah, the Bible talks about how Jonah is sent by God to Nineveh to speak to them about oncoming judgment and destruction. And in verse 4 it says, on the first day Jonah started into the city, and he proclaimed, 40 more days and Nineveh will be overturned. The Ninevites believed God, and they declared a fast. Now I want you guys to think about the length at which the Ninevites go to humble themselves and be sorrowful for their rebellion against God, okay? It says they declared a fast, and all of them, from the greatest to the least, so it didn't matter whether you were a king or just a peasant or a poor person, he says, put on sackcloth. You guys know what sackcloth is, right? It's burlap. You ever put burlap on it? I mean, it is terribly itchy. And so that's a symbol of their sorrow. So they put on sackcloth. Even the king put on sackcloth. And when the news reached the king of Nineveh, he rose from his throne, took off his royal robes, which I'm sure were super soft, covered himself with sackcloth, and sat down in the dust. Then he issued a proclamation in Nineveh, by the decree of the king and his nobles, do not let any man or beast or herd or flock taste anything. Do not let them eat or drink, but let man and beast be covered with sackcloth. Let everyone call urgently on God. Did you hear that? Let everyone call urgently on God. That's a point at which we are so broken before him because of the choices we've made. We're just like laying ourselves at his feet. And he says, let them give up their evil ways and their violence. Who knows, he says, God may yet relent and with compassion turn from his fierce anger so that we will not perish. Here's something we need to understand. Every offense that we have against our husband or our wife, our kids, our grandparents, our neighbor, someone else in the church, any offense that we have against them also becomes an offense against God. Did you know that? That you can't have a broken up, busted up division between you and someone else in your family or in your church family and have it all going on great with God. It doesn't work that way. It equates. I love what Gina and Diana were giving their testimony yesterday at the marriage retreat, sitting over here, and Diana said, and I just love this because this is something we've been kind of drilling in for years, that you love your wife how you love God. You love your wife how you love God. So if you treat your wife like crap, guess what? That's how you're treating God. And vice versa. And so he calls us to that point of regret and sorrowfulness. Here's the last one. The ashes are a symbol of repentance and change. In Jonah chapter 3, verse 10, it says, when God saw what they did, they're just mourning and wailing and saying, God, forgive us. When he saw what they did and how they turned from their evil ways, he had compassion on them and did not bring upon them the destruction that he had threatened. Do you know how many people I talk to every year that refuse to change? I mean, there probably some of you in this room at one point in your life said, I'm not going to church and nobody's making me one of those weirdos. Not happening, I got this all figured out. I don't need that stuff. And I just love seeing God just take our stubborn attitudes and begin to mold us and shape us. And then when we walk away from God, He just lets us, He doesn't have to do anything to us, right? He just steps back and then our lives fall apart and crumble because we're not relying on Him. And then we get humbled and we come to Him and He says, all right, come here. Let's get this fixed. I love you, And if we get stubborn again, then the whole process over again. It's just, you either pass the test or you learn it again. You take the test over again. And I wonder how many people are going to continue to dig in and be stubborn and say, but I'm not letting God change this area of my life or that part of my life, or I'm never going to start going and being one of those people. And they dig in and now think about yourself dead. Whatever you dug in for, was it worth it? Whatever you thought you didn't want to change in your life, whatever habits or whatever, patterns in your life that you thought you just lived or died for and that was more important than anything else, picture yourself dead and then ask the question, was it really that important? That it was not only going to determine your physical life, but it's going to determine your eternity if you rebel and continue to rebel against the living God.